The room fell silent like the calm before a storm. A baby's soft coo broke through the tension, fragile and innocent, and yet it seemed only to fan the flames of the woman's fury. Victoria's eyes blazed, sharp as daggers, her lips pulled tight over teeth clenched in fury. "How dare you touch my child?" she spat, each word slicing through the air like a whip. The sound hung heavy, thick with contempt, suffocating Maria in a bubble of humiliation. She stood frozen, hands trembling, body stiff, as if rooted to the polished floorboards. Her eyes fell to the ground, refusing to meet the icy glare of the woman who had spent the last hour turning a simple moment into a theater of judgment. The mansion seemed to shrink around her. The walls themselves felt alive, gasping, as if recoiling at the cruelty they contained. Every guest in the room shifted uneasily, murmurs threading through the air like nervous insects. Servants froze mid-step, hands hovering over trays and linens, caught between the need to help and the terror of drawing attention. Maria knelt, her knees pressing into the cold marble, heart hammering so loudly it seemed the entire room could hear it. She had loved this child as her own since the moment she had cradled her first, soft and fragile, waking at night to soothe, to feed, to whisper lullabies in the dark. She had done this silently, unseen, unnoticed, and now every ounce of loyalty and care was being weaponized against her. She swallowed hard, forcing back the tears that threatened to blur her vision, choking on her own dignity. Survival had always demanded silence. It was a language she had mastered early, when the world had made it clear that her voice, her pain, and her humanity were expendable. But beneath the crushing weight of shame, a spark flickered, a tiny ember of defiance, stubborn and dangerous, insisting that she was more than the sum of Victoria's wrath. Victoria stepped closer, heels clicking against the polished floor with a precision meant to intimidate, meant to dominate. Her voice rose, sharp and deliberate, each accusation more venomous than the last. "Unfit, disgusting, how could anyone trust you with something so precious?" Her words were arrows aimed straight at Maria's heart, each one leaving a mark, invisible yet deep. The nanny cam in the corner of the room blinked quietly, a red eye recording every slash of insult, every tremor of fear, every heartbeat racing with quiet fury. Outside, the wind clawed at the windows, rattling the panes like an ominous drumbeat, as if nature itself had tuned in to witness the injustice. Guests looked on, some feigning indifference, others leaning forward in curiosity, as if scandal were a delicious feast they were allowed to taste without consequence. Whispers curled through the air like smoke, careful not to reach the wrong ears but impossible to completely hide. Maria's hands rested on her thighs, trembling, fingers curling into fists. She wanted to vanish, to become nothing, to erase herself from this space that had become a cage. But there was something else, a quiet fire refusing to be snuffed out. Her eyes lifted slightly, just a fraction, to meet the edge of Victoria's glare, and for a heartbeat, the power dynamic wavered. Time stretched, each second a small eternity. Maria's mind raced through the memories that had led her here, sleepless nights, whispered lullabies, tiny hands gripping her finger in trust, smiles that lit the dark corners of this vast, indifferent house. Each memory was a shield, a reminder that she had nurtured love where only authority and wealth claimed right. Victoria's anger, while immense, could not erase what Maria had built in the quiet moments of care, invisible to all but the child herself. And yet the weight of accusation pressed down with brutal clarity, reminding her how fragile dignity could feel when measured against money, status, and prejudice. The words kept coming, each sharper than the last. "I will not allow someone like you to touch what is mine. You are beneath notice, you are beneath trust." Maria flinched, but the ember inside her glowed brighter. She remembered what survival had taught her: patience, strategy, observation. And sometimes silence was not submission, it was preparation. The red light of the camera continued its steady blink, recording the unraveling of what Victoria thought was control, documenting the quiet power building in Maria's chest. Maria's breathing slowed, measured and intentional. She thought of the first time she had been mocked for her simple beginnings, the way the world had dismissed her because of the color of her skin, the uniform she wore, the absence of her name in places that mattered. That mockery had been heavy, yes, crushing even, but it had also been fuel. It had taught her endurance. It had taught her that dignity was not given. It was claimed, quietly, steadily, persistently. And so she knelt there, trembling but not broken, allowing the fury of the room to wash over her, while her mind plotted the quiet revolution of patience, intelligence, and the truth that could not be denied. Victoria, sensing her victory, stepped back slightly, though the venom in her eyes remained. She believed she had won, that the humiliation she had inflicted would leave a permanent scar. But she did not see the subtle shift, the way Mariah's posture, though humble, carried an unspoken promise. She did not notice the small tightening of Mariah's jaw, the way her lips pressed together not to cry, but to hold power in reserve. The guest saw a kneeling maid, frightened and subservient. The camera saw a witness, a record keeper of injustice. And Mariah saw a future where this moment would be remembered, not as a mark of shame, but as the spark that ignited her quiet, unyielding rise. Outside, the wind sighed and whispered through the cracks in the old windows, as if carrying the stories of countless others who had been pushed down and silenced, reminding her that she was not alone. She lifted her gaze slightly, and for a fleeting second met Victoria's eyes, not with fear, not with pleading, but with the steady, unspoken certainty of someone who knew their worth, even when the world tried to deny it. One day, she whispered silently to herself, they will see. One day, they will know. And in that charged, suffocating silence, something shifted. Victoria's anger remained, but it felt smaller, shrill, petty in the face of quiet dignity. The baby cooed again, innocent and trusting, unaware of the storm but dependent on the heart that loved her unconditionally. Mariah's hands, once trembling, now rested lightly on her lap, steadying, centering. She had learned the lesson the hard way: power can humiliate, but it cannot touch the soul that refuses to surrender. The room, frozen in tension, seemed to exhale, the walls listening, the air thick with unsaid truths. Guests glanced around, uncertain, feeling the moral weight of a scene they could not fully understand. They whispered, they fidgeted, but they could not undo the quiet revolution that had begun in that small, kneeling figure. Victoria, still furious, could only seethe, unaware that her attempts to dominate had inadvertently revealed a deeper, enduring strength in the woman before her. Mariah remained kneeling, not defeated, but gathering herself. The ember of defiance glowed beneath her ribs, a warmth that would not be snuffed out. And as the nanny cam blinked, recording every insult, every glare, every moment of trembling silence, she made a promise to herself. The world would witness in time the truth she carried. The lesson, simple yet profound, would outlast the fury of the present. Respect is not demanded through fear. Dignity cannot be stolen. Humanity is not measured by wealth, but by the strength of the heart that refuses to bend. The wind rattled the windows once more, as though echoing her silent vow. And Mariah, kneeling in the quiet aftermath of scorn, understood finally that survival had never been enough. She would rise. And when she did, those who had sought to humiliate her would learn what silence, patience, and inner strength could accomplish. For now, though she remained kneeling, a single figure in a room heavy with injustice, holding a spark that could not be broken. One day they would see. One day they would know. Days passed, but the sting of Victoria's fury lingered, searing Mariah's mind with each memory, each insult, each sharp glance that left invisible cuts along her dignity. She moved through the mansion like a shadow, silent and careful, folding linens with precision, feeding the baby with gentle hands, her own trembling hidden beneath the veil of obedience. Every task was measured, deliberate, a careful choreography to avoid provoking another storm. Yet Victoria's eyes were everywhere, sharp as knives, catching the smallest misalignment in a blanket, the faintest smudge on the polished floor. And when she found it, oh, she always did, the eruption was volcanic. Glass shattered once, an accident that sent a trembling ripple through Mariah's chest, and Victoria's scream made it feel as though the entire room had collapsed. "You don't belong here," she hissed one morning, holding the baby at arm's length, her eyes narrowing as if Mariah were not even breathing the same air. The words were not just judgment, they were a declaration of invisibility, a reminder that her presence, her care, her love counted for nothing. Mariah knelt quietly later, Outside the nursery, her body shaking, the babies cooing a bittersweet reminder of the love that had drawn her here and the cruelty that rejected her. She leaned against the cold stone wall and whispered to her friend, voice trembling, "I've raised him almost as if he were mine, and still I am nothing." Each word was heavy with truth, each syllable carrying the weight of nights spent rocking, feeding, soothing a child who had given her more joy than the world had given her in return. Tears slipped down her cheeks, hot and silent, but beneath the ache, beneath the sting of being dismissed, something hardened. A quiet resolve, steady and unyielding, began to take root. Survival alone would not be enough. She would not allow her spirit to be crushed beneath the weight of someone else's cruelty. And so she began to document every slight, every hissed criticism, every accusation, every whispered word carried like a stone in the ledger of memory. She wrote in secret, notes hidden in her pocket, reminders of the injustices that filled the pristine rooms of Victoria's domain. The imbalance of power pressed down like the walls themselves, impossible to overcome, yet Maria endured silently. She learned to navigate the storms with grace, using invisibility as armor. Every fold of a blanket, every careful stroke of the baby's hair, every meal prepared and served without complaint was a quiet act of resistance. The world around her was polished, perfect, sterile, and cruel, but she found freedom in precision and patience, in the careful collection of proof that even the smallest injustice leaves a trail. She watched the baby's eyes follow her everywhere, curious and trusting, and she felt a spark of warmth. In those moments, she was more than a maid. She was the keeper of love, the unseen guardian of innocence, the quiet pulse of humanity in a house that had forgotten it. Victoria, meanwhile, continued to rule her world as though perfection could erase human frailty. Her days were filled with meetings, commands, and the relentless pursuit of control, yet even in her pristine universe, cracks began to appear. A file left slightly out of place, a glass that tipped too easily, a glance that lingered too long, tiny, almost imperceptible fissures that hinted at vulnerability. And beneath it all, the baby's soft gaze, following Maria wherever she moved, registering care and warmth that Victoria could not manufacture. The child's innocence, pure and unfiltered, highlighted the cruelty and emptiness of Victoria's authority. It was subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye, yet it was enough to unsettle the balance Victoria had so carefully constructed. Each day stretched long and heavy, the air in the mansion thick with tension. The staff whispered cautiously among themselves, noting the way Maria's presence seemed to calm the baby, the way Victoria's fury seemed to spike at the smallest, most human moments of care. The house, filled with wealth and elegance, was silent in a way that carried expectation, like a trap waiting to snap. Every polished surface reflected both the beauty and the danger of the place, catching the fleeting expressions that spoke louder than words. Maria felt the weight of eyes everywhere, yet she moved with careful grace, a shadow among shadows, collecting evidence, preserving truth, and learning the art of endurance. At night she lay awake, listening to the wind scratch against the windows, imagining a world where her worth was measured not by the uniform she wore, nor the color of her skin, but by the depth of her heart, the strength of her mind, and the love she gave freely without expectation. She thought of Victoria's words, sharp and cutting, and felt them like frost on bare skin. But she also thought of the baby, of tiny fingers curling around hers, of small smiles that radiated trust and affection. That bond was real, undeniable, and unassailable, a quiet testament to her value in a world determined to deny it. And slowly, ever so quietly, the ember of defiance grew warmer, stronger, readying itself for the moment it would ignite. The days stretched into weeks, and the tension became almost tangible, a living thing that hovered in every room, in every glance. Victoria's fury, though relentless, could not erase the small rebellions that gathered strength like seeds beneath snow. Maria's quiet documentation, the baby's gaze, the subtle, unnoticed acts of care, these were small earthquakes in Victoria's world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Each act was a whisper that challenged authority, a quiet defiance that demanded recognition. Maria learned to move through the mansion with the poise of someone who knew their worth, even when it was denied. There were moments when Victoria's attention faltered, and in those moments, Maria glimpsed possibilities. A misaligned blanket went unnoticed. A glass left slightly too close to the edge of the table remained unremarked. Tiny victories, yes, but powerful nonetheless. She allowed herself a quiet smile in the solitude of the linen closet, a private celebration of endurance and cunning. Every day of silent defiance, every carefully noted insult, every act of unnoticed care was building a foundation, laying the groundwork for a reckoning that Victoria could not see, could not prevent, and could not understand. And in that fragile, tense world, Maria began to feel something rare: hope. Not the naive hope of someone who expects kindness, but the hard, steady hope of someone who knows that truth cannot be buried forever, that justice often comes slowly, and that dignity is a flame no insult can extinguish. The wind rattled the windows, the baby cooed softly, and the mansion, in all its elegance, felt a little less certain, a little less invincible. Cracks were forming, silent but unmistakable, and Maria knew it. She pressed on, resolute, folding, feeding, documenting, enduring, not as someone broken, but as someone building strength in the shadow of cruelty. Victoria, absorbed in her perfection, had no idea how fragile her dominance had become, no inkling of the quiet power gathering beneath her nose. The scales were tipping imperceptibly, and Maria could feel it in every glance, every heartbeat, every whisper of wind against the windows. The storm was not yet visible, but it was coming. And when it arrived, it would not be with rage alone. It would be with the weight of truth, the persistence of patience, and the undeniable force of a soul refused to bend. Maria, kneeling at the edge of the nursery one evening, watched the baby drift into sleep, tiny chest rising and falling with trust she had earned. She placed a hand lightly on the child's back, feeling the warmth, the life, the bond that no insult could sever. And as she stood, straightening her uniform, adjusting her apron, she whispered softly to herself, the fire in her chest burning steady, "The day is coming. The day they will see, the day they will know." Not just of the love she had given, but of the strength that had been forged in silence, and the dignity that could never be taken. The mansion remained quiet, polished, and tense, a world that seemed invincible yet held its own secrets. And in the shadowed corners, in the quiet endurance of a woman who refused to be erased, a reckoning began to take shape, slow and inevitable, like the tide gathering strength before it breaks upon the shore. The envelope arrived without warning, slipping silently through the mansion's ornate gate, a quiet herald of storms to come. Maria had been tending to the nursery, smoothing the baby's blanket with hands worn from labor but steady with love, when Victoria swept in, her heels echoing like gunshots across polished marble. She held the paper in both hands, trembling, a strange mixture of rage and disbelief twisting her features. Her voice, the same voice that had cut through Maria's dignity day after day, now faltered. This can't be," she whispered, as if speaking the words aloud might undo the impossible truth on the page. The room felt suddenly smaller, tighter, the walls pressing inward, bearing witness to the unraveling of authority. Even the baby, lying small and warm in Maria's arms, seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, cooing softly, a sound that carried innocence yet commanded attention, like a tiny judge presiding over the ruin of arrogance. Maria lifted her eyes slowly, heart hammering in measured rhythm, keeping her face calm, unreadable. She had long suspected, long known in the quiet recesses of her being, that the bond she had with this child ran deeper than loyalty, deeper than nurture, deeper than the house and its suffocating hierarchy. The DNA test now confirmed it in black and white, a truth Victoria could neither deny nor erase. Maria's silence, her humility, her endurance, these were not signs of weakness but shields of dignity, layers that had protected her as she quietly carried the weight of injustice. And now those layers gleamed like armor, unbroken and unyielding, while Victoria's power, once absolute, crumbled with the revelation. Victoria's hands shook as she gripped the paper, her manicured nails digging faint crescents into the smooth surface, as though she could claw back the truth itself. Her lips parted, eyes wide, and for the first time she seemed small, human in a way that was unfamiliar, almost shocking. The room, which had long been a stage for her dominance, now felt like a witness chamber, bearing silent testimony to the collapse of tyranny built on fear and wealth. Every harsh word she had spoken, every accusation flung like a spear, every dismissive glance aimed at Mariah now circled back to her, ricocheting against the walls with a force that left her staggering. She had ruled through intimidation, through the certainty of her status, but certainty can vanish as quickly as it arrives when confronted with undeniable truth. Mariah's hands rested lightly on the baby's back, steadying, grounding, holding both child and moment in careful balance. She did not celebrate. There was no triumphant gesture, no whispered victory, no gleam of gloating in her eyes. Instead, she breathed, slow and deliberate, as though each inhale and exhale had been rehearsed over years of silent endurance. Her gaze was soft yet unwavering, fixed on the child who had been her life, her secret joy, her source of strength. The baby cooed again, unaware of the world's upheaval, holding in those small sounds a power Victoria could not wield. A tiny hand brushed against Mariah's chest, innocent yet commanding, and the weight of love in that gesture was heavier than any authority, sharper than any accusation. Victoria's chest heaved as if the room itself had expelled her arrogance. She took a step back, retreating from the truth she had fought to ignore. The paper trembled in her hands, the edges bending, as though the material could somehow absorb her shame. Her mind raced, replaying every act of cruelty, every morning spent lecturing, every evening spent scrutinizing, judging, asserting power over a woman she had believed subservient, invisible. The recognition of error, of injustice, hit her like a physical force, a stone settling in her chest, heavy and unmovable. She had wielded her wealth as a sword, her status as a shield, believing she was untouchable, but the moment the truth revealed itself, all her defenses dissolved like mist in sunlight. The room itself seemed to pause, holding its breath. Even the staff outside, who had witnessed countless eruptions, sensed the shift, the collapse of a hierarchy that had seemed eternal. Whispers fell silent, footsteps slowed, the air heavy with expectation, all of it drawn to the fragile, unshakable figure of Mariah, standing at the center of a world that had long tried to erase her. She had endured silently, invisibly, but she had not been defeated. The test had proven what she had carried quietly all along, that love and truth, however unseen, were forces no cruelty could erase. Victoria's eyes darted to the baby, still nestled in Mariah's arms, still cooing with tender, unknowing power. The child's gaze met hers briefly, and in it was clarity, a reflection of the care Mariah had given, and a subtle judgment on the woman who had attempted to control both mother and child. Victoria's voice, now smaller, uncertain, trembled. She opened her mouth, but no command came, no declaration. No threat could pierce the weight of reality now laid bare. She had once believed that authority was enough to define truth, but the undeniable bond between Mariah and the child rendered all that false, hollow, meaningless. Mariah's hands held the baby closer, the small warmth grounding her, steadying her. She felt no triumph, no need to assert victory, only the quiet satisfaction of justice revealed. The storm of Victoria's fury had passed, leaving behind a residue of stunned disbelief. Mariah's resolve, shaped by years of endurance, had carried her here. She had survived the verbal lashes, the invisible cuts, the daily humiliation, and now the truth had emerged with unassailable power. Dignity, patience, and quiet strength had claimed a victory that money and status could never replicate. Victoria's shoulders slumped, her posture betraying exhaustion and shame. She had been a queen in a palace built on fear, and now she was stripped bare, her arrogance exposed to a force she could neither resist nor comprehend. Every word she had used to belittle Mariah echoed back in the silence, heavy with irony. The mansion, filled with expensive furniture and cold beauty, seemed suddenly smaller, its walls holding the echoes of truth and justice, reminding all who inhabited it that power without morality is fragile. Maria, holding the baby, allowed herself a single breath of relief, gentle and unforced, the kind of breath that carries the weight of survival and triumph without a word. She did not gloat. She did not scold. Her victory was in her steadfastness, in her refusal to allow humiliation to define her. The baby shifted, small hands brushing against her cheek, tiny eyes wide and trusting, and in that simple contact was more power than all of Victoria's wealth, all of her status, all of her anger. The storm in Victoria's eyes slowly faded into something else: guilt, recognition, shame, but it came too late to reverse the truth that had been revealed. Mariah's silence had been her strength, her endurance a quiet testimony to the depth of her love and the inviolable dignity of her heart. The child's presence, pure and untamed, illuminated the failure of cruelty and the futility of domination rooted in fear rather than understanding. And in that illumination, Mariah stood tall, not as a subordinate, not as a servant, not as a shadow of humiliation, but as a woman whose worth had never been in question, whose patience and integrity had finally been validated. Victoria lowered the paper, her grip slackening, and for the first time she seemed small, human, vulnerable. She could not erase the past, could not unspoken the insults, could not reclaim the authority that had been shattered by truth. Mariah remained steady, eyes soft yet unyielding, holding the baby and the moment with the quiet power of someone who has known the pain of injustice and endured it with dignity. And so, in the silence that followed, the lesson settled over the room like a tangible presence. Power and wealth can dominate, can intimidate, can wound, but truth, love, and dignity are forces that endure beyond anger, beyond status, beyond fear. Mariah did not need to speak to claim victory. Her presence, steady and unbroken, spoke for her. The baby's soft coos filled the air, a gentle, unrelenting reminder of innocence and the quiet strength that nurtures it. Victoria stepped back, the weight of her actions pressing heavily upon her. She could only watch as Mariah held what was always rightfully hers, a bond no insult could sever, a love no fury could destroy. The mansion remained silent, the walls absorbing the lesson in a way the rich and arrogant rarely understood. And Mariah, standing unshaken, breathing with the calm of one who has survived and prevailed, held the child close, knowing finally that endurance, patience, and dignity had triumphed over cruelty and false authority. Victoria knelt, a posture so foreign it made the marble floor beneath her seem colder than ever. The air itself seemed to pause, holding its breath as the woman who had ruled with rage, arrogance, and absolute certainty shrank into humility. Her voice, usually sharp and commanding, now trembled with the weight of confession. I was wrong," she whispered, the words heavy, tangled with guilt, each syllable carrying the echoes of the cruelty she had inflicted. It was an unfamiliar sound to anyone who had known Victoria in her fury, a quiet admission that power without compassion is hollow. Mariah, standing still, her hands lightly resting on the baby's tiny back, did not respond with anger. She did not need to. Her silence spoke louder than words ever could. It carried the weight of endurance, of a life spent navigating injustice, of a spirit that refused to break even when every force in the household conspired to crush it. That silence was not empty, it was full, dense with meaning. It was a testament to resilience, a mirror reflecting a strength Victoria had never learned to see. For a long moment, the room remained suspended in tension, as if time itself had decided to honor the gravity of the moment. The household, a place long ruled by fear and dominance, felt the shift ripple through its polished corridors. Servants who had once flinched at Victoria's gaze now straightened, feeling the change in the energy around them. Guests who had attended her soirees with the knowledge that power demanded submission could now sense the cracks in the facade, subtle but undeniable. The world that had seemed immovable, a hierarchy etched in gold and marble, trembled under the force of humility and quiet strength. Slowly, Victoria extended her hand, hesitant, awkward, an offering not of authority but of apology. Her movements were careful, deliberate, as though she feared that even the smallest gesture could undo the sincerity she was trying to convey. She hoped it could mend what her arrogance had broken, a bridge across the chasm her words and actions had carved. Maria looked at the hand, then at Victoria's eyes, and for the first time she saw something she had not expected: vulnerability. Not the vulnerability of weakness, but of someone realizing that power is meaningless without conscience, without respect, without the acknowledgement of humanity. Maria did not immediately take the hand, nor did she move away. She allowed the moment to stretch, letting Victoria's shame settle, letting the truth of her endurance shine through. And then, with a quiet grace that had been forged through years of patience and quiet suffering, she accepted it. The gesture was small, intimate, almost imperceptible, but it carried more weight than any declaration of authority ever could. It was not victory over Victoria, but rather the affirmation of her own unshakable dignity. The air shifted further, lighter now, as if the house itself was sighing in relief, exhaling decades of inherited fear and learned cruelty. The baby, blissfully unaware of the human complexities around them, laughed, a sound so pure, so full of joy, that it seemed to fill every corner of the room. It bounced like sunlight off the walls, warm and transformative, binding two worlds together through innocence and trust. That laughter carried a truth neither wealth nor status could ever claim. Love, care, and integrity create bonds no cruelty can sever. Victoria, kneeling beside Maria, watched the child's joy, and slowly, something inside her softened. It was a lesson she had avoided for too long, one she had resisted in the name of pride. Power is not in domination. Authority is not in fear. True power is measured in empathy, in justice, in the ability to recognize the humanity in those society teaches you to dismiss. The household, once a realm of polished surfaces and clipped commands, began to feel different. Whispers no longer carried the tremor of fear, but a cautious hope. Tasks that had once been performed with silent dread were now executed with quiet pride. Respect began to grow where once only obedience had existed. Victoria's transformation, tentative as it was, set a precedent. She began to understand that dignity is not granted by title, wealth, or position, but by the choices one makes and the integrity one demonstrates in both word and action. Maria's presence, steady and resilient, became a standard in itself, a living reminder that courage and patience carry a force far greater than rage or prejudice. Maria held the baby close, feeling the warmth, the trust, the unspoken power in that tiny chest pressed against hers. Each heartbeat was a silent drum of victory, not over another person, but over injustice, over humiliation, over the quiet erosion of self that cruelty attempts to enforce. She had endured without yielding, and now the world around her, though hesitant and imperfect, recognized it. The baby's laughter rang again, and this time Victoria reached out, her hand tentative, brushing lightly over the small curls that had become symbols of love and truth. Even that small touch carried weight, a silent acknowledgement that the world was capable of change if one dared to face it with humility and honesty. The moral of the day, though quiet, resonated powerfully. Arrogance and prejudice, no matter how deeply entrenched, can blind even the most powerful, but patience, integrity, and quiet courage illuminate the path, even in the darkest halls of wealth and status. True worth is not measured by fear or by who can command the most attention. It is revealed in loyalty, in the steadfastness to endure when the world seeks to diminish you, in the ability to hold dignity when insult and scorn rain down relentlessly. Maria's strength had not been flashy or loud. It had not demanded recognition, nor had it sought vengeance. It had simply existed, quietly, persistently, until the moment came when the world could no longer ignore it. Victoria, kneeling beside her, seemed smaller, yet perhaps wiser, the arrogance that had long defined her giving way to a fragile but profound awareness. She could not undo the past, could not erase the words she had spoken or the pain she had caused, but she could change the present, could acknowledge the dignity of the woman who had endured, and could learn what it truly meant to wield power responsibly. Mariah's acceptance of her apology was not a surrender. It was a demonstration that grace, when paired with strength, is far more formidable than rage. The household, once a stage for fear, was now quietly transformed. Every corner, every hallway, every polished surface seemed lighter, freer, as though the very air had been cleansed of the residue of cruelty. The staff moved with a newfound confidence, the baby's laughter filling the gaps of silence with warmth and possibility. The walls, which had witnessed years of inequity and silent suffering, now seemed to hold a different kind of memory, a testament to resilience, to the quiet power of love and patience, to the truth that injustice can be endured and overcome with grace. Mariah stood, holding the child, feeling the weight of both her journey and her triumph. She did not boast. She did not demand recognition. Her strength was evident in her posture, in her steady breathing, in the quiet light in her eyes. Victoria, kneeling nearby, had learned a lesson that wealth and status could never teach, that humanity, empathy, and justice define true power. The two women, once separated by fear and hierarchy, now stood together in an uneasy but genuine understanding, their bond cemented not by command, but by acknowledgement of dignity and shared recognition of truth. The baby cooed again, reaching tiny hands toward Mariah's face, and in that gesture lay the essence of everything that had been endured and overcome. The laughter, the innocence, the trust, were forces no cruelty could undo, and they filled the room with a quiet, transformative energy. Victoria's eyes softened, her shoulders lowering from the tension that had once ruled her body, and in that small, human act, the moral became undeniable. Respect is earned, power is guided by conscience, and dignity is a treasure that endures even when the world attempts to strip it away. And so the story settled into a gentle rhythm. The mansion, once a fortress of fear, now resonated with quiet hope. Mariah's journey, from humility to unshakable strength, had transformed the very air around her. Victoria, humbled and wiser, had glimpsed a truth she could no longer ignore. The baby's laughter, pure and untainted, carried forward a promise that love and integrity will always outlast arrogance and cruelty. In the stillness that followed, the moral lingered, clear and powerful. True worth is revealed not through wealth or fear, but through courage, loyalty, and the quiet, unyielding strength to endure injustice with grace.